Greetings to students and viewers. Welcome back once again to this educational channel called Learn Bio with Janet. I'm teacher Janet. Today we'll be studying Form 4 Biology, that is the KSSM syllabus, Chapter 15, entitled Sexual Reproduction, Development and Growth in Humans. So we are going to discuss subtopic 15.1 on the reproductive system of humans. So please take note that this video is for those studying the KSSM syllabus, which is the new syllabus. And I've already produced a video for the students studying the old KBSM syllabus earlier. So this one is more for the Form 4 students studying the KSSM syllabus. The learning outcomes for today's lesson are as follows. 15.1 Reproductive System of Humans. After this lesson, we should be able to characterize the anatomy of the female reproductive system and the male reproductive system. To characterize means to describe the characteristics or features of something. Thus, after this lesson, we should be able to describe the characteristics of the female reproductive system and the male reproductive system. This means we have to know the structures or the organs contained in each one of the systems here and also be able to describe or explain their functions. Now, firstly, what is the necessity for reproduction? So, the continuity of a species depends on the increase in the population of the species through the process of sexual or asexual reproduction. So, the process of reproduction, that means the formation and production of new individuals for a species, aims to help the species continue to exist. All right? Because organisms will live and then die due to disease or predation or old age. Thus, new individuals must be produced through reproduction to increase or to maintain the population of the species so that the species can continue to live on or exist without going extinct. So what is the definition for sexual reproduction? Sexual reproduction is the production of new organisms, that is the offspring, through the fusion of a male gamete and a female gamete. That means the male gamete, such as the sperm, fuses or combines with the female gamete, such as the ovum, especially the nucleus. The nucleus of the male gamete will fuse with the nucleus of the female gamete during a process called fertilization, and the product will be a diploid zygote that then develops into a new individual, and that is the offspring. So this offspring inherits the genes from two parents through the gametes, but it is not genetically identical like either parent, not 100% genetically identical to the father or the mother. Thus, sexual reproduction involves the production of the male and female gametes, such as the sperm and ovum, by individuals who have reached sexual maturity. And then after that, the fertilization of one gamete by the other creates an offspring or creates new life. So now let us study the reproductive systems of humans, right? The male and female reproductive systems of humans. Let us begin by discussing the structure of the female reproductive system. So we're going to discuss the organs that are found in the female reproductive system and their functions. Now, the first organ is the ovary, which is the female reproductive organ that produces the ova, singular form is ovum, or female gametes. And the ovary has a second function of producing two sex hormones, the female sex hormones, which are estrogen and progesterone. Now, what's the function of estrogen? It promotes the development of female secondary sexual characteristics, such as the start of the menstrual cycle and the widening of the hips. For progesterone together with estrogen are involved in the regulation of the menstrual cycle, which we'll be studying later. Okay, so the ovary is involved in producing the ova or eggs. So it will release a secondary oocyte or an immature egg cell into the fallopian tube once in every menstrual cycle, right? Once every 28 days, around 28 days. And this immature egg cell will travel through the fallopian tube and it may be fertilized. All right, so the fallopian tube or oviduct, sometimes it's called the oviduct, is the place where fertilization occurs should there be sperms that swim up the fallopian tube. Then fertilization may occur. So it has tiny hair-like projections in the inner wall here called cilia. And it can carry out peristalsis, meaning to say that the muscles in the fallopian tube can contract to push the embryo. If an embryo is formed, the embryo can be pushed to the uterus, down to the uterus for it to be implanted in the uterus. So the embryo is formed if there is fertilization and formation of a zygote that can develop into the embryo. Even if not, the secondary oocyte or the immature ovum will also be swept down to the uterus, where it will come out through the through this pathway. Okay. Now, so the fallopian tube is the site where fertilization occurs, and the cilia and peristalsis is action of peristalsis moves the embryo or the ovum, or what we can call the secondary oocyte, to the uterus. Now, the secondary oocyte will be studied more in the next lesson. It's just an immature egg cell. All right. Next, we have the uterus. The uterus is an organ with thick muscular walls, in pink here, colored pink. And the inner wall is lined with another layer of tissues called the endometrium. Okay. So the endometrium is a layer of blood and tissues rich in blood vessels, and it secretes mucus. So the function of the endometrium is that it is the site where the embryo will implant or will get itself attached to. And this endometrial tissue or endometrium is rich in blood vessels to supply the embryo with nutrients and oxygen for its growth. Now, overall, the uterus is the place where the embryo develops during pregnancy. So the uterus helps to protect the embryo of fetus, and it also produces an organ called the placenta, which is involved in the exchange of nutrients, oxygen, and waste products with the mother's blood. Okay, so we'll be studying more about the placenta in the coming videos too, right? Okay, then next we have the cervix. The cervix is just an opening leading up to the uterus. It secretes mucus to help sperm swim upwards to the fallopian tubes. Then lower down here there's a passageway or canal called the vagina, where the sperms enter, and the vagina is the passage for birth, for the baby to come out from the uterus through the vagina and out to the external environment. And it is also the place or the passage for the menstrual flow or menstruation to flow up. So menstruation is just basically the breakdown of the endometrium. All right, it consists of the blood and tissues that come out when the endometrium breaks down if there is no fertilization. So in every menstrual cycle, if there's no fertilization, the endometrium will break down, and then the blood and tissues will come out through the vagina, and this is called menstruation. Again, we'll be studying more about the menstrual cycle in the coming lessons, so don't worry about that. So here are the notes about the female reproductive system that we have discussed just now. I'll go through it very quickly. The ovary is the female reproductive organ, and it has two functions. It produces the ova or female gametes, and it also produces the female sex hormones, estrogen, which promotes the development of the female secondary sexual characteristics, such as the start of the menstrual cycle and the widening of the hips. And another hormone produced by the ovary is progesterone. So both estrogen and progesterone are produced by the ovary, and they help to control the menstrual cycle, which we'll be discussing later on. Now, the fallopian tube is a thin muscular tube in which the inner wall is lined with cilia, which are tiny hair-like projections. So the fallopian tube is the site where fertilization occurs. Then after that, the sweeping action of the cilia and peristalsis of fallopian tube, where muscular contractions occur, that's peristalsis. These two help to deliver the secondary oocyte or the embryo to the uterus below. So the secondary oocyte is just an immature egg cell. And embryo is formed if there's fertilization. So these structures will be swept and moved down to the uterus. Now, the uterus is an organ with thick muscular walls. The inner wall is lined with endometrium tissue that is rich in blood vessels and helps to secrete mucus. So there is another layer inside the uterus called the endometrium. It is the site where the embryo implants, and this endometrium or endometrial tissue is rich in blood vessels to supply the embryo with nutrients and oxygen for its growth. Thirdly, the uterus is the place where the embryo develops during pregnancy, so it helps to protect the embryo or fetus, and it produces the placenta, which is an organ that supplies nutrients and oxygen to the fetus. The cervix is the narrow opening leading to the uterus, and it secretes mucus to help the sperm swim upwards to the fallopian tubes to fertilize the ovum. The vagina is a canal for sperms to enter, and it serves as a passage for the birth of the baby, for the baby to come out of the mother's uterus, and for the menstrual flow. Here are some fun facts about the uterus. Hold up your fist. The normal size of the uterus is about the size of the fist of the woman. Now, the shape of the uterus is like that of an upside down pear, and the size is also quite close to that of the size of a pear. The weight of the uterus is only about 100 to 200 grams if there is no pregnancy. Let us discuss the structure of the male reproductive system, starting from the organ where the sperm is produced, and then we'll trace the pathway of the sperm until it is released from the body through the urethra and out into the external environment. Okay, so a male has a pair of testes, which is the male reproductive organ that produces sperms in the seminiferous tubules here, which we'll discuss later. And it also produces, the testes also produces the male sex hormone called testosterone. The function of testosterone is to stimulate the maturation of the sperms and the development of the male secondary sexual characteristics during puberty at around the age of 14 for boys. All right. So examples of the male secondary sexual characteristics that develop around puberty due to the stimulation by testosterone are the deepening of the voice, development of muscles, and also the growth of the moustache and the beard. Okay, the moustache is called the mesae. Now, so then after that, the sperms will be stored in the long coiled tubule called the epididymis. It's for the storage and maturation of the sperms. Then after that, the sperms will be transported through the sperm duct here, which is colored purple. It is also called vas deferens. And the sperm duct will carry the sperms to the urethra, which is the yellow tube here, the tube colored yellow here. So the urethra is actually connected to two systems. It's connected to the male reproductive system and also to the bladder, that means to the urinary system. Okay, This is the bladder here. So the bladder is not part of the male reproductive system. This is part of the urinary system. So next, the sperms will move through the sperm duct, and on its way it will pass through the seminal vesicle, which is a gland that secretes fluid with nutrients for the sperms. Alright, it will secrete fluid that contains nutrients like fructose that gives energy for the sperms to swim. Then the sperms will also pass through the prostate gland, which secretes fluid that helps in the movement of the sperm. Okay, and below the prostate gland there is another gland called the corpus gland or bulbourethral glands. It's not shown here, but this will be stated in the notes afterwards. So this corpus gland or bulbourethral glands produce mucus to protect the sperms and help to the mucus helps to neutralize the acidic urine in the urethra. Okay, so in that way it protects the sperms from being destroyed or being killed. So generally the secretions from these three structures, the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, and the corpus gland, all of it will be mixed together, and it will help to provide food, protects the sperms, and help in the movement of the sperm. Alright, so these secretions plus the sperm will form the semen or the seminal fluid that flows out from the body. Okay, so the semen or seminal fluid will flow through the urethra. Urethra is a tube that channels the sperm and urine out of the body. Alright, now other than that, there's the scrotum, which is like a bag that holds the testes in its place and protects the testes. And then there's the penis, which is this part that releases the sperm into the female's vagina during copulation or sexual intercourse. So this system is very well designed to carry out the function of reproduction. Alright, so here are the notes concerning the various structures that we have discussed just now. Alright, very quickly, there's the testes that we have mentioned with the two functions to produce sperms and also the hormone called testosterone. Right, and then the epididymis is for the storage and maturation of the sperms. It's a long cord tubule. Vas deferens, a long duct that carries the sperms from the testes to the urethra, and it's also called the sperm duct. Now then there are the three structures that secretes certain fluid or mucus. They have various functions. The fluid from seminal vesicle contains nutrients for the sperms. The fluid from the prostate gland helps in the movement of the sperms, and the mucus from the corpus gland or bulbourethral glands these glands produce mucus to protect the sperms and by neutralizing the acidic urine in the urethra. That's why I have this word urethral here. Okay, so generally the secretions provide food, protect the sperms, and help in the movement of the sperm. Right, and they form the semen. Urethra channels sperm and urine out of the body. Scrotum protects the testes, and penis is to release the sperm into the female's vagina during copulation. For the objective questions or structured questions, we need to know how to list down the pathway of the movement of sperm. Right, so the sperm first moves from the seminiferous tubules, where they are formed, in the testes, into the vas efferens, and then from the vas efferens to the epididymis, and then from there to the vas deferens, which is the sperm duct. So take note that there's the vas efferens that connects the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis, and then there's the vas deferens, which connects the epididymis to the urethra. Okay, so After the vas deferens or sperm duct, the sperm will then be transported past the seminal vesicle, through the prostate gland, and past the Cowper's gland, where secretions will be added to form the semen or seminal fluid with the sperms. And after that, the semen will move through the urethra and out from the body. Let us now discuss a new hot question. Compare and contrast the functions and structures of the testis and ovary in the human reproductive systems. Right? So here we're going to compare the male gonad or reproductive organ, that is the testis, with the female gonad or the female reproductive organ, that is the ovary. Now, so there are two similarities here based on their functions. Both the testis and ovary are reproductive organs or gonads, which produce gametes. Second function, both produce hormones, both produce the sex hormones, and thus both are endocrine glands, because endocrine glands secrete the hormones. Now the differences. The testis produces male gametes called sperms, whereas the ovary produces the female gametes called ova, or more specifically they are called the secondary oocytes, which are the developing egg cells. We'll discuss more about secondary oocytes in the next video. The testis produces the male sex hormone called testosterone, but the ovary produces the female sex hormones, which are different, the estrogen and progesterone. Thirdly, testosterone stimulates the development of male secondary sexual characteristics, such as the deepening of the voice and the growth of the beard or moustache. Estrogen stimulates development of the female secondary sexual characteristics, such as the start of the menstrual cycle and also the widening of the hips. Number 4, the testis contains seminiferous tubules that produce sperms. So the structure of the testis is that it is made up of many coiled seminiferous tubules inside it that produce the sperms. Whereas the ovary do not have these seminiferous tubules, they have what we call follicles. Follicles are just like bags that contain the oocytes or secondary oocytes or developing egg cells and other cells called follicular cells. So they are sort of spherical in shape. That's all for this lesson. Remember to share, like, and subscribe. And thank you for viewing it. Goodbye for now.